Hey everybody, how's it going? New video today? Of course, that's why you're watching. Hey everybody, you are watching. Yeah, anyways, I can't talk. Yeah, talk about the books I've read recently, some books I've picked up. Um, what's on my agenda basically. And just a quick aside before we get started for you folks that like my cologne videos, which I know I haven't really done. As you could say, I don't even really do that anymore, but I actually have some coming. It might not be like an expansive multi-series thing, but I do have some coming, and I'm looking forward to them, so that's something to look forward to, as well as some Blu-ray videos talking about some movies I've watched, things like that. So yeah, we're going to talk about books today, though. Quickly, things that I've read, and before I even get into that, I do want to say there's one book that I just can't remember if I know I've mentioned it, but I haven't really talked about it, and that's Revival by Stephen King. If you watch some of my book videos, you'll know, like, as it probably is the case with a lot of horror fanatics, Stephen King got me into reading, really. In middle school, I started reading him, and that kind of hooked me into reading as a big hobby. And then I took a huge break from him because that's pretty much all I was reading, and I haven't really read a lot. And of course, I've read some really, really good stuff. Now, King is great, and I love King, but there are some, I've kind of tended to gravitate towards more literary stylings, right? But King is still the boss, right? And I've heard just so many good things about Revival that it's one of his more literary offerings, and it's a really good story. So I really look forward to reading this, and I kind of want to dig into it. I've had it for a while, but I think if you've read this, of course, don't spoil it, but probably October, right? If you've read it, I feel like October would be a more appropriate month to read that book in. I don't necessarily read books at a certain time period during the year, but sometimes that's nice, right? Other books I've read, one that I actually have on hand, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I think I've showed this copy off. This is an Everyman's Library copy. They're my favorite publisher, bar none. Their books are beautiful. I think that cover's kind of strange, but they all have a nice sleek look to them, and I've showed off these books before. They're beautiful. This is not the 1818 text, but the like 1832 text or whatever. There's some minor differences between the two. But I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I didn't give it 5 stars because it just didn't wow me. Like it didn't like blow me away. Like Dracula really sucked me in, and I could not stop reading Dracula. This I really enjoyed, but I wasn't like, just Dracula, I just couldn't get away from the book. I just sat down and read it. I actually was camping when I read Dracula, most of it, so there's that, because there's not a lot to do when you're camping. But I literally sat in a chair for like 6 hours and read Dracula. I had to like force myself to get up and like walk around. I was that hooked on that book. This one, not so much, but it was still really good. And it's more of like a philosophical sort of postulation on things. It's very dark and bleak, and there are some scary moments in it. But I think if I were to recommend the 2 books to people, I think more people would probably go for Dracula just because it's a little bit more readable. But Frankenstein was really good, great to read, and very rereadable, something I'll read again. Probably the next time I read it, I'll just read the other version, the 1818, just to, get a different thing. But great read, beautiful thing to have. After that, I read Pride and Prejudice, which my copy's in another room, but I never read that one. I just wanted to check it out. I'm not much for romance. I do like rom-coms once in a while, but it's not really my big, genre I go for. Man, I liked it. Now, granted, I will tell you, I normally do okay with classics, but for some reason, I had a hard time with Pride and Prejudice. I found the language a bit difficult, and that's weird because like one of my favorite books of all time is Robinson Crusoe, which is much older than Pride and Prejudice by almost 100 years, and I have no problems with that book. So I don't know exactly what it was, but one thing that I did pick up on the book was that it's very satirical and very, very funny, and I was not expecting that at all. So despite the fact that I had some problems with the text, in terms of like overall understanding, I had to reread stuff and take it slow. I really enjoyed it. Again, one that didn't blow me away. I gave it 4 stars, but I really liked it, and I was just taken aback by how funny the damn book was. And then after I read it, it basically took me a lot longer to read than I thought it would. It took me like a week, where I thought it would take me like 2 or 3 days. And it's a short book. It's like 370 pages. I went and I watched the 2005 film with Keira Knightley, and I just watched it because I know that's like the most popular adaptation. I know there's another one from the 90s, I think, a series. But I was expecting that to just be a straight romance and not really pick up on any of the satirical aspects. But I thought actually it was really good. I was surprised. It wasn't like, you know, a masterpiece of a film, but it was really good. And I think that they leaned into the comedic elements of the book pretty well. Specifically the insane mother. They're just Mrs. Bennet, just ludicrous character, like, and Mr. Collins. I know that this is a classic novel, but I've never read it, and I'm glad I have now. I can talk about those characters. It was a good one. It definitely took a little bit to sink in, but I enjoyed it. After that, I read Blood Meridian, which I read in high school, and I think totally went over my head. So I'm glad that I came back and read that one. I did enjoy it when I read it the first time, but this time, reading it again, this is going to sound super, super screwed up, but it felt like a warm, fuzzy blanket. I know that sounds terrible talking about Blood Meridian, but McCarthy's prose is just unmatched by most authors. I shouldn't just say any author, but most authors. He writes circles around most people. So he could be writing about the events of Blood Meridian, and it's just like, you're reading poetry, really. And he does, I mean, granted, if you've read that book, you'll know there are some beautiful moments, there's a lot of moments describing scenery in the most beautiful poetic ways. So there's a lot of beauty in that book, but there's also a lot of horrible things. But it's just such a total package of a novel. It's a 5-star read easily. I'm glad I reread it, and it makes me want to read it again. The only other McCarthy book I read was No Country for Old Men, and I don't even think I finished it, and that was in high school as well. It's amazing that I haven't kept up with him. I'll just have to go and read all of his books. But I'm glad I reread that one and got back into the McCarthy spirit. I also have a copy of The Passenger, so I should give that a read. I might save that, though. All right, next are books that I picked up. Oh, before I go into that real quick, and I'll try to keep this brief, but I did read a book on my Kindle, which I don't do super often now, but a book called Blind Sight by Peter Watts. And I think I'll have to do a separate video on that book because it was so complicated. It's an absurdly good science fiction, hard science fiction. It's so hard to describe. It's basically about, on Earth, these like fire probes start coming down over the whole Earth, and they're basically taking a picture of the whole Earth, and everybody basically is like, oh shit, that's aliens. And so they then receive a beacon, like a probe that's sending a signal not towards Earth but out somewhere far out in the Kuiper Belt, like near where like Neptune is, you know, like around there, very far out in the solar system. And they send this group of like genetically engineered superhumans that are like vastly more intelligent than normal people to go check it out. And among them is a vampire, but it's not the kind of vampire you're expecting. It's like an evolutionary like offshoot of humans that like died off. It's like it's one of those books where it's hard to explain the setup, but it all kind of works. And it's like a first contact novel, but it doesn't always play out in the way you think it's going to. And I think I would give it like 4.5 stars. There's a few pitfalls in it, and mostly the pitfalls are in Peter Watts' prose, which falters a bit at times. But the overall story and what it's trying to talk about are amazing. I can't really talk about more or it'll just ruin the experience. But if that sounds at all interesting to you, an extremely well-written, highly intelligent science fiction novel about first contact that is just done in a way that you don't see often. It's a very smart way to do it. Check it out. It's a hard read, but I think it's worth it. And I've never really read anything quite like it. I'm glad I read it. Okay, next is one I'm reading currently. I just started reading this, and this is a novel called Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica. I can't really pronounce her name. She's an Argentinian author. Everybody has talked about this book. Everybody in the horror realm, BookTube, whatever. I don't know. I just haven't read it. One thing I will say is this book is mighty short. It's about 200 pages. I would probably describe this as a novella. I didn't realize how short it was. One thing I will say, you know that I really like the quality of my books. This is a really nice paperback. It's got this like thick cover on it. There's the author. It's a slick paperback, but yeah, everybody's read this. I'm looking forward to reading it. So far, so good. Next is Beloved by Toni Morrison. I know Toni Morrison is one of the best American authors, but I have not read any of her work. So I figured I would start with here. And in the line of Tender is the Flesh, another one of those really, and there's Toni Morrison, who's no longer with us, but one of these great, this is a beautiful paperback. It really is. This one as well. Just, you know, I tend to like hardcovers. I'm not a paperback fan, but these are beautiful editions. So there's that. And along that line, the novel Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, also approaching, this is about 200 pages. Actually, this might even be less than that. 193 pages. This is a novella. I don't consider something that's 200 pages to be a novel, really. I know it's word count based, but you see that? Another absolutely beautiful paperback. Really nice. You know, it's interesting, like $18. That's what they're listed. I didn't pay that for this, not even close. I normally buy my paperbacks used. Even my hardcovers, really. But that seems a little too pricey for a 200-page novella, right? Everybody's read this and said it's great. Although, actually, that's not true. Both of these have kind of mixed. I would say that both of these are kind of beloved in the community, but I see a lot of mixed reviews. But I really want to read this. I see Jeff Vandermeer pop up in introductions to stories I read and stuff, so I got to just check them out. Two more. And a lot of these are probably going to get saved for October, for spooky season. And the only other book I really want to read in October that I've never read is The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. That's who wrote it, right? If I'm correct. I love the film. I've seen the film many times. I love it. I'm not excited for that reboot that's coming out, even though Ellen Burstyn is in it. It's not looking good. I saw a trailer for it. Not a fan of the way it's looking, but got to read the book. So I'll probably read that. Two more, though. One is Ghost Story by Peter Straub. I've never read this. I've never read Straub. I've never even read their collaborations. I owned, didn't they write, was it Dark House? I can't remember the two. There were two, I think, that they did, him and King, but never read them. But everybody, you know, this is considered like one of the best horror books ever written. I know that people don't always get on with his writing, but I will like to see for myself what's going on in that. And the last one is one that I'm very excited for. This book kind of is mixed as well. People don't tend to like this as the author's other two books, but I don't really care. I'm going to check it out anyways, and that is The Little Friend by Donna Tartt, and beautiful hardcover. Take a look at this. You know me with my hardcovers. I love them. It's just a beautiful book. Kind of creepy. I don't think this is a horror novel, but kind of creepy. I know people don't love this one as much as her other two novels because it kind of like meanders a little bit. Like, as some people said, it's a little bit plotless compared to her other books. But here's the thing about Donna Tartt. I read The Secret History, right? I have not read The Goldfinch. I'll read that. But I read The Secret History, and I would rank that in top 3 books I've ever read. It was so unbelievably good, story-wise and character-wise and theme-wise, but really just her writing. Her prose and her writing ability is second to none. So she could basically write a shopping list, and I would read it. You know, I would read anything Donna Tartt writes. She could write a nonfiction book, anything. I would read it. So I'm just looking forward to just reading her writing again. If the book doesn't exactly hit the mark, that's fine, because I'm going to get 600 pages of Donna Tartt prose. So that's all. Yeah, let me know what you're up to, what you're reading, what you've seen, blah, 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 and peace out.